Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Welcome to our Ritual Night Talk for March 1st, 2022. I'm Scott Stenwick, your host for these Ritual Night events, presented under the auspices of Leaping Laughter OTO in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Before I get any further, remember to like, subscribe, request notifications. That way you'll always know when we post a video here or go live on the Leaping Laughter YouTube channel. Tonight, our topic of discussion, as I mentioned last week, is the star sapphire. So the star sapphire is It is Aleister Crowley's improved ritual of the hexagram to go with the star ruby, the improved ritual of the pentagram. And it was originally published in the Book of Lies, along with the older version of the star ruby that was later updated to match the god names of Liber Regulae. And it is also, in some ways, one of the more enigmatic rituals of Crowley, because some of the description, some of the instruction on how to do the ritual isn't really contained in the published ritual text, as we'll get to as I go through that. So I've included an article from my blog on the star sapphire. I have also included the donation link. No donation is too small. All donations go to support the operation of Leaping Laughter OTO, and those two links are in the description for this video. So, first of all, stepping back a little bit, I've talked about this idea of the operant field, which is the idea of combining the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram with the lesser invoking ritual of the hexagram. The star ruby and star sapphire are constructed similarly. So, the star ruby is pretty much explicitly designed as a banishing ritual, and the star sapphire is explicitly designed as an invoking ritual. So whether or not, Crowley really had systematized this, what we do see here is we see this is really pretty much, the first instance of, the standard forms for ritual being set as a banishing pentagram ritual and an invoking hexagram ritual. These are both general rituals, just like the lesser ritual of the pentagram, lesser ritual of the hexagram. They are designed to tune and set up your working space for any kind of operation that you might want to do. And there's a few other components in the star sapphire that are different from what you'll see in the lesser ritual of the hexagram, just like the star ruby has a couple of extra steps as well. So I'm going to basically just start going through the ritual and how it works, and certain points where some explanation is required for explaining how it's done. It's an interesting pop culture thing. The star sapphire is mentioned in the Hellier series. As they get through like season 1 and season 2, and they find out that the secret is supposed to be they have to do the star sapphire. They're all like awed by this. It's like, well, it's a general hexagram ritual. It does have some extra steps in it that are interesting, but basically it's not that much more complex or that much more difficult than the lesser ritual of the hexagram, at least when it's done in the ceremonial form. So, to starting out the ritual, you are supposed to be armed with your mystic rod and provided with your mystic rose, whatever that means, and we'll get to that. So one of the things about this ritual that, before I really get too far into it, is that this is obvious sexual symbolism here, and the star sapphire certainly is constructed in a way that could be done as a sex magic ritual with a partner, where you're actually having sex with your partner during the ritual. I'm not going to be talking as much about that application of it. I'm going to be talking more about it in a ceremonial context and in a symbolic context. Because, if you're going to do this for daily practice, well, if you're lucky enough to have a partner who's going to work with you on your daily practice doing sex magic, well, that's awesome. And I don't know that you need a whole lot of help from me in that regard. On the other hand, if you are a magician, you're doing your daily practice, and you want to incorporate these rituals as a replacement for the lesser ritual of the pentagram, lesser ritual of the hexagram, probably you're not going to be doing that every time you do your daily practice. So So certainly the rod and the rose, they can refer to a sex magician and a partner. But, they also just can refer to the wand and also a weapon like the cup that can be put in the center of the altar. And so I'm going to actually do that here. Just give me 1 second. Got a cup here for later. Then I get my copper fire wand here. So you've got your rod, and the mystic rose symbolically is the cup. So the ritual also states that the adept shall be equipped with these weapons, implying that at least what Crowley was thinking was, well, the magician should be an adept before they do this operation. And, well, the Golden Dawn did have it structured so that, like the lesser ritual, the hexagram, that was something that you did not learn until you made the grade of Adeptus Minor. So in that sense, Crowley copied some of that stuff in the AA. And so the idea, I think, here is that, well, you get to Adeptus Minor in the AA, and then you start working with these rituals. The way I generally construct them and the way I work with them is I don't make necessarily a lot of those strictures as far as, working with the ritual. I will say that, if you are somebody, you do obtain knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel, I could tell you that this ritual works better. But it's also not something that is like, well, you absolutely can't do it. I don't really like those kinds of prohibitions. I find that magic tends to be magic, and if, while it's true that, if you are, not at, a particular level of consciousness or realization or whatnot, you'll find that, the rituals don't necessarily work as well as they do as you move, quote unquote, up the tree of life and so on. It's really more a case of you just do it and you keep doing it, and the doing it is what gets you to where you want to be. So in that sense, I have a little bit of a different perspective, certainly than what it sounds like the early Golden Dawn did about this ritual. And so I don't think that you need to be an adept to do it. I think that was maybe one of the things that was like a scare thing in Hellier, where, but we've got to find an adept who can, well, I can. But anyway, the point is that you can practice this ritual whether you have knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel or not, in my opinion. I have done it for a long time. I've gotten results with it. Other people who have worked with it, without necessarily going through like Liber Samech or that kind of stuff, have also had good results with it and so forth. So it really can be used pretty much like the lesser ritual of the hexagram in ceremonial operations. Now, to start the ritual, you do one of two things. And so, first of all, Crowley says that you can give the signs of looks, which are the which are the signs with the keyword analysis from the lesser ritual, the hexagram, or you can do the signs of Nox. And in this case, he specifies which signs of Nox they are and in which order, which you don't have in the Star Ruby. So it is Puer, Vir, Puella, Mulier. And you omit the sign Mater Triumphans. That would be this one, but you don't give that one. Now, what you're doing here, in my opinion again, because this is my interpretation, is you are essentially setting the scope of how you're going to be working with the ritual. So, and it should also be noted that there are some alternative keyword analyses that are more thelemic and not necessarily as Osiran. I mean, we have one that I use that is, it's Isis Horus set Tahuti that I use with the lesser ritual hexagram that I use in the Elixirites. That's a version that we wrote for my magical working group based on an earlier version by Benjamin Rowe. And there's some other stuff out there that you could find that isn't necessarily, Osiris dying and reborn God kind of stuff that, lines up better with the thelemic current and the thelemic formula. You can go ahead and use the ones from the lesser ritual, the hexagram, though, or If you have a modified version that you like, that can be okay too. When you're working with the signs of LVX, you're talking about manifestation. And so how I interpret that is the signs of LVX are what are used with the star Sapphire in order to manifest practical things, whereas the signs of Nox are used for more mystical and celebratory kinds of rituals. And so depending on what kind of thing you're doing, basically a magical rite, you do the signs of LVX. Mystical rite, you do the signs of Nox. And so that is kind of depending on how you want to work with the ritual. And it depends on what your operation is, what your charge is, what your goal is, and so forth. So you need to decide on that. For daily practice, probably what you're looking at is more of a mystical thing. So when I've used it for daily practice, I go ahead and use the signs of Nox with it. But I have also used the signs of Lux with it as part of larger practical workings. And it does kind of make a difference in terms of how the feel of the ritual is. And so I go into that a little bit more in the article. But so moving on from there, the ritual is actually not super difficult to perform. The next step consists of you're going to trace hexagrams, you're going to go clockwise, starting in the east. Note that the star ruby goes counterclockwise to banish, and the star sapphire goes clockwise to invoke. And so this is one of the ways you can see the orientation of the ritual. The star sapphire, in theory, you could also do something like change the direction of the hexagram in the star sapphire to go banishing or invoking or something like that. But in order to be as a counterpart to the star ruby, it really is more of a situation where you're going clockwise, you're invoking, so you would naturally use invoking hexagrams. And the hexagram is a question about this ritual. So Aleister Crowley says you trace the holy hexagram. Okay? And so what is that? Well, there's another chapter in the Book of Lies, not chapter 36, which is the star sapphire, but this is chapter 69 of the Book of Lies, that talks about what the holy hexagram is. And basically how the holy hexagram is laid out is it has a descending red triangle and it has an ascending blue triangle, and those are overlapped. So the Golden Dawn had a version of the triangle, what Crowley calls the triangle of nature in this chapter. So it's upright is red, upright triangle is red like fire, downward triangle is blue like water. And the holy hexagram is essentially, it's a color inversion of this. So it's like you flip that over. And the descending red triangle, that's a symbol of Rock Kuwait. And so Crowley sees it as the blue triangle is essentially mystical aspiration, and then the red triangle is like the divine flame descending. And so one of the things in the article, I don't know if I've updated this or not, but so it seemed to be really clear that when you're reading the instructions of the ritual, here's the holy hexagram, it's these two triangles, and so that suggests it's a regular triangle. You have an upward triangle, a downward triangle, and they're interlocked. So that's like the regular hexagram, right? Well, actually, played around with that for a while. And I also heard unofficially that there apparently was an instruction that the hexagram is actually supposed to be unicursal, even though unicursal hexagram doesn't quite fit the way that that looks. It really, in our custom version of the lesser ritual, the hexagram, the unicursal does work better. And I've started playing around with this in the star sapphire, and I think the unicursal does work better. So I'm drifting in the direction of using that. And so when you're tracing the unicursal, then what you've got is, so you'll have like this V would be the upward triangle. It's not a triangle, it's more like a V. That's blue. This one is red. And then the lines cross in the middle and kind of fade into each other. So, starting with red at these points and then going to blue when you get to these points. And so that's what the unicursal would look like traced in that way. And so I've been visualizing it that way lately. I think probably it's better based on what I'm seeing, but I haven't gotten to the point of drawing a full experimental conclusion from it. So it's very possible that instruction I heard about was valid. And yeah, the hexagram is then supposed to be unicursal, but feel free to play around with both versions. Probably also doesn't really get into and say how you trace the hexagram. So I have a way that I do this, which is what you're doing is you have the Latin words representing father, mother, son, and daughter going around the circle. And each is paired with one of the others. And so what I do is, when I'm tracing this, I trace from the top point of the universal hexagram, if for starting with father and son, and from the bottom point, starting with mother and daughter. And so they alternate going around the circle. The other thing I like to do with the cup is you put some wine in the cup, and that becomes your sacrament for later in the ritual. And so if you're going to use that, you want to cast the hexagrams across the cup to the opposite quarter. Now I'm going to actually do this backwards. So this is actually east behind me. But what I'm going to do here for demonstration purposes is I'm going to assume that that's east, and I'm going to just go around like I would normally do the ritual, going around clockwise. But remember that I'm actually off from where my temple is there. So it goes like this. So you get your wand, you want to do your signs of knocks or signs of looks. Once you've done that, you do the 4 hexagrams. If you're doing them unicursally, it is like this. Pater et mater unos Deo sararita. Mater et filios unos Deo sararita. Filios et filia unos Deo sararita. Filia et pater unos Deo sararita. And one other thing that I would be doing if I wasn't using this camera setup is I would actually be going around the altar doing that. So that's mater et pater. That's pater et mater. This is mater et filius. And the idea is just like working with a table of art, you're keeping this cup in the center so that the force of what you're casting is going across the cup. And the reason you do this is because now that you've done the hexagrams, there's an instruction here that is not very clear at all. People have different takes on this. Okay, so what it says is, it says that he shall return to the center, saying, Ararita, 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 and he shall make the rosy cross as he may know how to do it. Okay, that's not exact phrasing, but that's paraphrased. And so you make the rosy cross saying Ararita, 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 and then Crowley adds that the signs in this shall be set triumphant and Baphomet. Okay, so and then if you look, set triumphant is actually the same as mater triumphans. And then it says, also set shall appear in the circle and shall partake of the sacrament. Okay, so then what does that mean? Okay, so here's how I do it. So if I'm not using a cup, I go ahead and I trace the rosy cross in the air in front of me, and I do Ararita, Ararita, Ararita. Then I go ahead and give the sign, set triumphant, and a Baphomet. Okay, I do it just like that. So it's pretty simple, really, in that regard. If I'm using the cup for a physical sacrament, which lines up a little bit more, I can go over the cup like with the elixir. So, Ararita, Ararita, Ararita. And as you can see, that union of the rod and the rose, I mean, that could be as a sex magic operation as well. Here we're doing it symbolically, like the symbolic great rite with the cup and the wand. And so then, set triumphant, and a Baphomet, and set shall appear in the circle, and partake of the sacrament. And you drink it. So there's some discussion over how this all works, what it all means, and so forth. And I think the deal is, and this is my take again, is that, so basically the Rosicrucian magical tradition is about unifying polarities. And so one of the things that Crowley saw was working with sex magic. Well, oh, that's like, a completely concretized way of unifying polarities. And so he kind of saw that as kind of the height of Rosicrucian magic. And likewise, so this would flow into masonry and all this kind of stuff. All the stuff that originally came out of this Rosicrucian idea of magic. And so that's where, you could read Crowley essentially talking about things like, well, the ultimate secret of masonry is sex magic. Well, that's where it comes from. It has to do with this unification of polarities in the Rosicrucian tradition. And furthermore, in thelemic magic, which employs the formula of life and growth, you bring together the two polarities, and then they reproduce and produce a third entity. Okay, so this is, Nuit and Hadit coming together, creating Ra-Ur-Kuit as an example. But the magical child is separate and independent from the two polarities that came together to produce it. And this is really kind of one of the secrets of thelemic magic. It's been worked out in different places, but when you're creating magical child, and the magical child is truly independent of the forces that were conjured to create it, it creates a new third force with its own source of spiritual power. And this can be employed with talismans and all kinds of stuff. Basically what it means that if you employed this on a large scale, it means that magical operations could in theory be stacked together. In other words, you could keep making talismans, all of them, magical children linked to various things. And even if they were the same talisman doing the same thing, the probability shift from the talismans would add together. And there may be some point of diminishing returns there. I've only tested this with small numbers of talismans. It holds up for, one talisman going to a couple talismans. That basically holds up. So what's interesting about that, and then if you read in, De Thaumaturgia, Crowley talks about how, well, the secret of the OTO is that, you could cast spells without, depleting your vital essence. And I don't completely believe that, just casting spells, really depletes your essence or your health. I haven't run into that. I have run into, though, you have a whole bunch of spells running, and they're all just basically linked to your sphere of sensation. What's going to happen is the magical power you have is going to get divided up among all of those things. So, let's say you do a 100 to 1 probability shift, but you got 10 spells running. Well, every one of those spells gets about a 10 to 1 shift. And, as you add more, it just keeps diminishing. Whereas if you use this method, you bring the forces together, the polarities combine, they give birth to the magical child, which is, in this case, it would be the sacrament, or it would be something more abstract if you weren't using a physical sacrament. Like, it's your daily practice, you are giving birth to yourself every day, that kind of idea. It could be something like that. What it means is that the magic you place into the magical child is separate from your own magic. That separation is really key. And I think that if there's a point where, we're going to be able to investigate magic as a technology, and that's the direction we're going to want to go if we want to get big probability shifts, like, mythic kind of stuff, get a whole battery of talismans enchanted, in single operations, each operate their own, all of them a magical child of the work they were created from, and then allow those probabilities to add together to accomplish a particular objective. Allows you to overcome a lot of pretty hard probability barriers. Okay, so with the physical sacrament, what you're going to do is, so you've done the rose cross overhead, the sign of set triumphant. This symbolizes the creation of the magical child. And actually what you want to do here is then you'll consume the sacrament, and you want to give the sign of Baphomet, which is all the same as Moulier. And so what this symbolizes that you have created the magical child, which is the union of polarities. You now consume the sacrament as a Eucharist. And Crowley talks about the Eucharist. It's a subject. You embody it with magic, and then you consume it in order to take that magic into yourself. You are taking the magic of the unification of polarities into yourself, and now you are Baphomet, because Baphomet is fundamentally a glyph that represents the union of polarities, male, female, as above, so below, solve et coagula, and so forth. So, when you're at this point in the ritual is basically complete here if you've opened it with the signs of Knox. It really says you repeat the signs of looks. So if you're doing a practical operation, you want to repeat your look signs here at the end. But if you did it as a mystical operation, you just do the signs of Knox. It says you do not repeat the signs of Knox, for it is he does not repeat the sign of Knox, for it is not he who will arise in the sign. It is not he who shall arise in the sign of Osiris risen, or that isn't the exact wording, but it's what is basically being said is that, so you've done the signs of Knox, you've gone through this, and in effect, the signs of Knox, they cross the abyss. You have symbolically transcended your mundane self. So in effect, you aren't doing a gesture at the end that is stabilizing you being you. Okay? And so you are doing this from this new perspective. Again, it's the idea of, like I mentioned earlier, so you're doing this ritual, what you're giving birth to as a magical child is fundamentally yourself. I mean, even if it's a sacrament you're consuming, if you're doing this for mystical purposes, you have unified all the polarities, and you are not necessarily representing yourself as separate from the rest of the forces invoked in the operation. And I believe that's the reason that you don't repeat the signs of Knox. Now, then this ritual, it can be followed up with other things, whether it's done practically or mystically. Daily practice, I would follow it up with the 11-fold seal, which I talked about earlier. That works kind of like a middle pillar. Following the 11-fold seal, I would do, meditation. I might do some other kind of operation. And then finally, you would seal it off with the Kabbalistic cross from the star ruby at the very end. And so that would be the practice sequence going star ruby, star sapphire, 11-fold seal. If you want to do your daily practices using completely the Thelemic God forms. And that can be cool. It can work really well. And doing a daily Eucharist is another thing that Crowley recommended to his students. And so if you're doing a physical sacrament here, well, in effect, you are doing a daily Eucharist if you're doing this ritual as a daily practice. So that's another way to kind of check another one of those boxes on things that you should be doing, things that you should be practicing according to the plan of study that Crowley laid out. So with that, I think I'm going to stop there for tonight. That pretty much goes over over the star sapphire. And as you can see, it's not really that spooky or weird. The fact that it can be done as a sex magic ritual gives an additional dimension to it. But it also can be used as a ceremonial rite here on its own as part of a regular practice sequence. So with that, I'm going to be signing off. Remember to like, subscribe, request notifications, and check the links. I have a link on the Star Sapphire article and also the donation link in the description of this video. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of the evening. Love is the law, love under will.